The inception stage, went through this inception stage vaguely. Like initial stage is a planning stage. Planning stage is a stage when we realize that, okay, we need a road here. Maybe like, for example, we need a road from Bangalore to Mumbai, and we are realizing that already there are existing roads. We need another route to deviate the traffic. So we decide the road alignment. So how do we decide the alignment? That's what I said. A survey team go to the site, go all the way through along this road. They survey the locations. They get the points of get the levels at the ground, and they bring it to the roads department. So roads department, they find the locations of suitable level and start connecting like obligatory points. There are a lot of principles that are involved in selection of a road alignments, but that is not a major concern to a bridge engineer. After this, we decide the bridge location, because we might have a river, or we might have a road or rail that we have to cross. So it's obvious that we need a bridge there. So we decide the bridge location, and then we proceed to the geotechnical department. So geotech investigation means a geotech team goes to the site, and where the bridge is being constructed, drill bore holes. They get the subsurface data, prepare their analysis report, and they submit to us. Data, we decide what kind of foundation we need. Since we talked about foundation, there are different kind of foundations. Mostly there are open foundation that we use on relatively stable soil, hard soil at a shallow depth. That we say the normal foundation that we see, that's called open foundation. Well foundation. So well foundation is one of the most commonly used foundation in India, and we might have just studied well foundation as a 1 or 2 page, or maybe maximum 5 page syllabus in our textbooks, but it's one of the most commonly used foundation in India. Also pile foundation, that's also important, but always, if possible, we try to stick on to open foundation, because we don't want to increase the expense by boring a pile or driving a well. So it's all expensive. So minimum excavation, and if we can find a good foundation there, that is the best way to go. So mostly we try to go with an open foundation if possible. If not possible, we then go with other options. Small drawing there just for you to get an idea. Bottommost portion is the pile. We all know that the cap that is connecting all the piles is called pile cap. Yeah, we all know that. So sometimes when it is an open foundation, the pile won't be there. Only a structure that is similar to the pile cap will be there. So that is called the open foundation. Then what you see above the pile cap is a pier. So pier is the structure that transfer the load from superstructure to the foundation. This pier could be a single column or multiple column. There could be like 1 or 2 column like lined up in a row, or maybe 3 or n numbers, I should say. So depending on the highway width, this whole arrangement of pier cap is again the cap connecting all the piers. And if it is only one pier, still the pier cap is there, because we have to collect the load, through the bearings. So depending on the highway structure, the width of the pier cap increase. So if the highway is 4 lane, we might require maybe a 20-meter pier cap or whatever. And if it is 6 lane, we have to increase it accordingly, because all the bearings from the deck ultimately rest on the pier cap. And this pier cap transfer the load to the pier, and the pier transfer the load to pile cap, and in turn the pile cap transfer the load to pile. So this is the whole load transfer mechanism. And this arrangement of pier cap, pier, pile cap, and pile together is called the substructure of the bridge. And the deck portion, the deck and the maybe it could be of anything actually. It could be deck and a deck slab and a concrete girder. I mean that girders placed between the piers and a deck slab placed above the girders. So that could be one arrangement. Or there could be a steel truss, or there could be steel girders. There are different arrangements for a superstructure. So all this arrangement together are called superstructure. So just a difference from this normal substructure like of the pier and foundation arrangement we have at the abutment. Abutment is usually referred to as the terminal end, like end of a bridge. So both the ends we have abutment usually. Abutment could also be a pier, like a pier-like structure. But most of the time we have an abutment that resists all the load that is coming from the superstructure as well as the earth pressure that comes from the backfill of the abutment. So sometimes if it is a pier-like abutment, we have separate retaining earth walls that take the pressure from the backfill. We'll see more about in detail later. So once we have all the span and your technical data, everything ready with us, we move on to the load calculation. This is a basic thing that we always do even in building design. So we have a set of load that is going to act on the building, and we design for that. But for a bridge, since it is exposed to different natural loads and even loads from the vehicles, we have a set of loads that these loads, this for your information, these are taken from IRC 6. IRC is Indian Road Congress. So Indian Road Congress 6 is a design code that we use for the load calculation of bridges. So there are different codes of, if I have to design a railway or a metro rail, I use IRS code is Indian Railway Standards. It's totally different. And there also you have same set of loads, but few extra loads. But as most of the bridge engineers go into highway sector, I just took IRC 6 and I'm just the loads from IRC. And I believe most of the universities also just confine their bus in bridge engineering to IRC standards. From IRC 6, we have these many loads: dead load, live load. I need not explain much about dead load and live load. We know that impact load is a load that is very specific to the bridge, and we usually have a factor for the impact load. And we have wind load. So wind load, again, it varies depending on the superstructure form. If it is a truss, it is going to have a lot more contact area, and it has more wind load. And there are longitudinal forces. So by longitudinal forces, the braking effect, if you apply a brake in a vehicle, that load is getting transferred to the deck, and in turn the deck is transferring that load to the bearing. Just a moment, just taking a moment off this topic. A bearing is a structure that connects deck, or the superstructure and the substructure. So whatever load is acting on the superstructure, that goes through the bearing, and then it moves to the substructure. So this bearing facilitates the movement of the bridge. So most of us may not realize that these bridges actually move. There is expansion and contraction in the bridge, and they are in like constant movement depending on the variation of temperature and application of these loads. So we are allowing these movements to reduce the stresses that is acting upon the bridges. So to allow this movement, we have bearings, and we also have these expansion joints. Just for you to understand that. So now coming to the centrifugal force that comes if the bridge is on a curve. You might have seen some of the bridges that is connecting to a major highway, like a cloverleaf, or there are different curved bridges. So in those bridges, we have to design it for buoyancy effect. Is again another effect. If it is in water, always there is buoyancy, and we have to consider the buoyancy. Effect of water current. Like I said, if it is in water, the water has a velocity, and that is having an impact on the substructure. So we take the effect of water current into account, and also the substructure. Even the substructure is shaped according to the water current. And if there is no water, we could go for a rectangular substructure. Rectangular pier. But if there is water, maybe we should go for a diamond shaped or maybe pier, because we know, right, the aerodynamics effect. So here the hydrodynamics, to facilitate the movement of water and to have lesser impact on the substructure, we change the shape of the substructure as per our requirements. Then we have thermal effects. Like I said before, the temperature changes all throughout the day. The temperature at night is not same as what it was in the afternoon. Due to this change in this temperature, these fluctuations cause stresses in bridges, and this cause the bridge deck to expand and contract. So this is going to affect the stability of the structure. So we have to always account this thermal effect. And also, if it is a, like I said, there are single pier structures or multiple pier. So multiple piers, suppose if I take a framed pier, design of bridges slide. So here you can see, here the bridge deck is supported over two piers. So it's a twin pier system. So there could be multiple columns that is going to support the deck. So if it is a single pier, there won't be any thermal stress. But if it is a multiple pier system, always there are thermal stresses involved. Thermal stress, as in there will be differential elongation and contraction in both the both the columns, and that is going to increase the stresses in the bridge. So to account for these stresses, we have some design procedure that we follow in StatPro. We have some temperature stresses that we apply, and when we apply that, that is taken care of. Now, after thermal effects, we have deformation and horizontal effects. These are some of the forces that come in a later stage. So we know we have learned about creep and shrinkage. There are some deflections that happen over the period of time. So any kind of structural change that happens in the bridge, that is inducing a stress in the structure. So we have to take all these kind of effects counted during the design stage. And erection stress, this is a very complicated and very important field, that erection stress, because I can just design a bridge. I should also construct with the construction team on how they are going to construct the bridge, because that is going to influence the stability of the bridge a lot. If I assume that a girder is going to be constructed over the pier, and I design the bridge, I may not take any erection stresses. But suppose for the contractor it is not convenient, so they cast the girder on the ground, and then they lift it cranes, and then they place it over the pier. Then we have 3 lifting points that is going to change the entire support condition of the girder I have designed, because I just designed the girder for 2 support condition at the end. But when we lift this girder maybe with 3 or 4 support points, it is inducing in between span moments, and we should have sufficient reinforcement at those locations to counter these stresses. So this is what I said. The proper coordination with the construction team and also the construction planning team is very much important to know and understand the erection stresses. And so basically that is regarding giving the lifting points and finding the most suitable method of erection. And finally, we also have seismic loads. Seismic load is more or less similar, and we have different seismic zones. It's all same. We as we all already learned in our university college studies, the different seismic zones have different impact on this construction. Usually we design for zone 3. And if it is zone 4, if higher zone, we design it as per the location. The modeling comes into action. So once you have all the loads listed in your hand, so you need to model the structure and apply these loads. So in StatPro, we do this modeling in the modeling space of a truss bridge as well, because just to understand how different modeling is done. So a typical bridge is modeled as what is shown on the left, on the right side. And if you want to change the superstructure, you can prepare a model of a truss or whatever the superstructure is, and you can just place it over the bearings. It's so simple, but it requires too much precision, and and you should have a very good attention to details, because and you should understand each and every member that you model, what is the member sizes, what are the properties you have provided, what is the material that you used. Any small mistake that you commit in the modeling will have serious impact on your design. So modeling is the most important and the most careful task that you have to execute during a design of bridge. So so we'll discuss more about the modeling in detail later. This analysis and design is a final output of the modeling. So we model some model the bridge, and now we have to analyze it. So if there are any mistakes in the modeling, we will have errors or warnings that comes up, and we have to clear all those errors. And then finally we have the analysis. So analysis we do for the span, we do for the substructure. So each component of the bridge is analyzed for the maximum conditions or the governing conditions, and they are designed. So the key factor for all this successful design is careful modeling. Everyone should pay more attention to. So once we have this analysis results, we just have to take these governing conditions, and maybe we usually already have a design sheet prepared for that. We for every bridge we initially prepare a design sheet that is specific to the bridge, depending on the skew, the skew of the bridge, the span of the bridge, everything. And we have to just input these analysis results on in the design sheet, and we do the analysis. We do the design. So how to do the design? It should be most economic, and it should be safe. How we can do an economic design? We go to the maximum, like the capacity possible, and very closer to the required capacity, but still the reinforcement ratios, everything again that also will be close to the limit. So usually in our Indian designs, we go everything to the limit, even the reinforcement, even the capacity, everything we go to the maximum limit. Like we leave some 10% or 5% difference. Other as everything we just go to the maximum limit possible to reduce the cost. Preferred area for any bridge engineer, because that is a place where you get to actually design a bridge to like do your brainstorming and do all the hard work, do the modeling, load calculation, everything. And you then have contractors. So contractors are the people who actually execute these bridges. So but usually they also have a structural engineer. What is the role of the structural engineer there? So whatever design that a contractor gets, those should be reviewed, and there might be many decisions that has to be taken at site regarding the placement of reinforcements, regarding some design parameters. So most of the time a contractor has a structural engineer. And we also have like project management consultancies, different like sector that we see in this infrastructure industry. Like for example, for a building, if a client needs a 10-story structure, we approach a designer, and we ask for the design, and they design it for you. And if the client is happy with it, they just take it. But coming to the government sector, since we deal with projects of like large value, like millions or billions, usually the government organization, the government representative there, maybe a executive engineer or a chief engineer or whoever it is there, they may not be able to take a decision by their own due to the complexity involved in the design. So usually they appoint an engineer on their behalf. So that engineer is called the project management consultancies. So usually for minor projects, it might be just one company. But for major projects, it will be a consortium of like maybe 2 or 3 companies. So these project management consultancies, they review the designs from the designers. They ask for changes. They ask for some maybe to increase the reinforcement or change something. Everything is ultimately controlled by money. So how much money you have and how much you're ready to spend. So all this is done by these project management consultancies on behalf of these government agencies. And obviously you have final job prospect in government sector. But if you go into government sector, you do not get to do all this design stuff. You go into the management side, where you have to coordinate between the contractor, designers, and also your project management team. So that's what you usually issue the tenders, collect the tenders, and all the management stuff you do there. And one particular area that I did not mention in this, that came to my mind right now, is forensics. So that is one latest trending in structural engineering, that is forensics. So if suppose a bridge has uh, like I said, there are a lot of rehabilitation work that is going on right now, and like historically important structures in this transportation sector, and we cannot just demolish them and construct them. Sometimes we may have to go there, inspect it, do some tests, find out the most suitable way to preserve the existing bridge and how to widen that. So a lot of things has to be done. So things are done by the forensics engineers. So forensic structural engineer, they go study the bridge, analyze it, do some testing on it, and come out with the most feasible solution to rehabilitate the building. So it's mostly about rehabilitation, but that is just an upcoming field. It's not yet not common in India, but in other countries, in foreign countries, it's very common for forensic structural engineer. If you're a civil engineering graduate and you join a consultancy, most of them, they take you as GET, or graduate engineering trainee, or if you're a postgraduate, they take you as a PGET, postgraduate engineering trainee. Mostly after 1 year, you get promoted as junior design engineer or engineering consultant. So company to company, these designation changes. It's not same everywhere. After that, you become design engineer or maybe senior engineering consultant, and then you become project consultant, where you deal with a bigger project alone, without help of independently. You deal with a project with, you manage a team of junior design engineers and graduate engineering trainees and some CAD technicians. And that's a stage where you start becoming to act like a manager, project consultant, or senior design engineer. And then you later, when you first join, it's very similar to the consultancy. You join as a GET or PGET, and then there you might soon become a junior engineer, because demand for engineers are more in construction field as well. And then they will become senior engineer, then assistant project manager, then project manager. So mostly contractors, the structural engineers that I mentioned who work with contractors, they're usually experienced structural engineers, those who come from those consultancies. So moving up in the ladder in a contractor, I wouldn't say it is difficult, but so usually the basic criteria that everyone follow, basic procedure that everyone follows, is that first you join a consultancy, you work there for 3 to 4 years, then you move to a contractor side, you act as a structural engineer for the contractor, you get paid more. Yeah, that's how your career grows. Project management consultancy, you work as a proof checker for the client. So the client is most of the time a government body, PWD, or railway, Indian Railway, or a municipality. All varies. So there, usually you have a junior engineer, because there they don't take like freshers as such. Freshers do not have much scope in these PMCs, because they are what they essentially do is reviewing the design that come from a consultancy. To review something, you need to have some experience, some knowledge in that field. So that's why they usually take some experienced people from this consultancy, and they move up the ladder from junior to senior engineer, and then later the project manager. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your time.